Hello friends, welcome to Meetup 7 and I welcome you all in the user group. And we have successfully completed 6 meetups till now and it's because of the continuous efforts from my team. So here is my team. We having Sumit, Rohit, myself, Nadeem. Then there are few new members also, Keshav, Riddhi and Rafi. Before starting the session, I would like to iterate you through the housekeeping rules. We do have the channel on the Slack Pune Splunk Pune user group. So join us there here to get more notifications. And for Q&A also you can use the same session. Please keep your lines muted when you're not speaking, and all the slides, recordings, and feedback form will be sent to your email once the session is over. And yeah, so today for today's session is Thomas List, and he's going to talk on dashboarding wows. So let's I'll hand over the session to him so that we'll get enough time to go through all these steps.
Perfect. Thank you very much. Hi, everybody. My name is Tom West, and I am newly joined at Splunk as a PS consultant. I'm also very proud to be and honoured to be a member of the Splunk Trust, which is an amazing group of people. Aline being one of them as well, joining today with my two fezzes. Now, really proud to have two now. One for me and one for my son, who, as I mentioned earlier, is likely to come in, and if he sees me wearing it, will nick it off my head. So, yeah, that's always a challenge, especially in these lockdown times where you've got children in the same house around as well. So the good news as well, there is no PowerPoint. The reason I'm not sharing my screen yet is because I have no PowerPoints which to show you. It's all completely a demo. So without further ado, let's go straight into it. The one problem with having a new job is that you also tend to have security issues with your machine. This being the first Google Meet session, it's the first time that it's asking me for loads of prompts around sharing. So I hope that you can see this screen right now. Awesome. Sweet. Right. So it's not a PowerPoint presentation. What we're going to do today is we're going to go over five things. There's a couple of other parts to it as well, but mainly 5 different topics. If you don't do dashboarding much, if you haven't really gone into the depths of dashboarding, then we're going to start off with tokens, give you an idea of what they are, why you want to use them, and just kind of start some ideas flowing for your own dashboards there. And then we're going to go on to something called hidden text inputs, which is a great way of being able to manage tokens and the values and controlling how your dashboards look. That's a personal favorite of mine. Then we're going on to CSS, so doing some dashboarding tricks using CSS to really change the look and feel of your dashboard. If you ever saw the virtualracer.conf prior to .conf last year and had a look at some of the dashboards, some of the videos around that, you'd have really gotten a good idea of what you could do with CSS. We're going to make it a lot more basic this time and just show you some of the basics, but also why you would want to use CSS. And then going a little bit out of off-piste, and we're going to answer the age-old question of how do I make this dashboard available to people outside of Splunk? Spoiler alert, you can't. But you can make use of something called report embedding, and we'll go over that, and also I'll show you some of the challenges with that and how you could possibly work around some of those as well. And then once you've done some embedding and you've gone and built some really awesome dashboards, then how you could use Splunk to also version control your dashboards as well. Git is a great way of being able to source control your dashboards. However, Git has its own problems, and this can work alongside Git to really make use of and make it easy to version control. So without further ado, onto some tokens. So if you haven't come across tokens before, a user input may be the first place where you actually come across what a token is. And every time that you have a dashboard, if you've got a drop down, a text input, whatever it is, where you've got some sort of interactivity, behind there is a dashboard. And you will probably see this with when you insert a form, an input, that you get this joyous screen of a massive white box, say with a red exclamation mark, making it seem as though there's an error going, searches are waiting for input. And that's because we've got no input associated with this drop down. If I select yes, it will run the search, and then it's got what you would expect and what you would want to see, which is, in this case, just a table with a message showing hi there. Doesn't matter whether I hit yes or no, it will be the same. Well, so what we could do is we could make use of behind the scenes dashboard is just XML, and there are some operators within that XML to control whether you want to display something or not. One of them is called the depends argument. So in this case, it will be depends, and then whether that token exists or not. So this code here is exactly the same as here, except we're using a depends argument against this input here to see whether a user has gone and selected something or not. If they have, as I go and do here, then we show the search box. Otherwise, we don't show that area, and therefore you're not given that search as awaiting input. We can also make use of the opposite of depends, which is rejects. And in this case, again, it's exactly the same as above, but this time we've got a message saying, please select an option, making it really clear what we want someone to do without having a massive screen with an error message, making it look as though something's wrong. Here it's very obvious, select an option. We select an option, the rejects argument becomes false, the depends argument becomes true because we've selected something, and now we just get the message of hi there. And behind the scenes, the XML, like I said, the dashboard is just made of XML. We can see exactly what this dashboard is. So you can see it's kind of broken down. It's all surrounded with a form block. In here, we've got 4 different rows. Row number 1, which is test 1. Row number 2 is test 2. Row number 3 is test 3. And then row number 4 is the actual XML block itself. And within here, we've got a single panel. So one open panel. We've got a close on panel and row below. And if we look at the first one, we've got the input, and the type is drop down. The token is select view 1. So like I said, an input has to be associated with a token, and you have to give it a name. In this case, we're calling it select view 1. If you've done any programming, tokens are basically just variables. We can see the label, and then we can see the 2 options that we've got, yes and no. And then below here, we've got our search block. So we've got the table. Within there, it's controlled by the search. The query is just a make results. If you've never come across make results before, it's a great way of being able to demo certain piece of logic within your searches, test something. It will just create a proxy event. So there's a few arguments that you can use to create multiple events. And here we've got our use of the token select view 1. How you use a token is you've got a dollar, or the Americans call it a pound, and you reference the token name, and then you close it with a dollar or a pound as well. And this basically and having this here, it won't do anything because make results isn't after an argument, but it will make sure that search does not run until that token exists, which is how you get that screen saying search is awaiting input. Now, usually what you would have is index equals blah, 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 source type equals blah, 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 and then maybe a field equals, and then what you're referencing in your input. You will get exactly the same thing if that token does not exist. You could even have the token right at the end. If the whole search needs a token to exist, then it's going to say search is awaiting input. If you have a very big dashboard, this also becomes quite useful if you want to control how many searches are run at one time by using tokens. And if tokens don't exist, the search doesn't run. Therefore, you might not hit your quota. So there's some really interesting ways you can use search tokens within searches and just control how things run. As we go on to the row below, we can now see that we've got depends arguments. So as you saw, I selected the table, and then that showed the next element. That's what this depend argument is. You can see it here, and you can see it here in the table depends, and then show 2 results. Otherwise, this is pretty much the same as the block above. The only other difference as well being this done event handler on the search. So in this case, what we're doing is we have our input exactly as before. Once we've selected a value, that will then execute this search because this token exists. Once the search is completed, it will the done event handler will fire, and it will go, right, okay, now I want to set this token of show to results. And the table itself depends on the show to results token existing. So it won't display the table until the search is executed and is done, and then that token exists. Otherwise, it's exactly the same. You can just see how a done event handler works, and also how the depends argument works on the table. And the depends argument could be a row, it could be a panel, it could be an input, it could be anything, as long as, or almost anything. I think some inbuilt HTML blocks, for instance, some of the arguments in there, you can't use depends, but the typical ones that you would have with a Splunk dashboard, you can make use of depends and rejects for that matter. If we go on to row 3, this time where we demoed the rejects functionality, this is exactly the same. All this here is the same. The done event handler is the same. Just as above where we had test 2, select view 2, it's now select view 3. Otherwise, everything else is exactly the same. The only difference being this tiny bit of HTML block here where we can see the rejects argument. And this is using the exact same token as the table. So depends, show 3 results, rejects, show 3 results. So if show 3 results does not exist, it will show this. Otherwise, it will show this. And it's really simple. It's really easy to put together. It looks and sounds as though it might be quite difficult, but it's really simple. And if you've never come across tokens and how to show and control views, this is a great place to start. There's an app on Splunk base called the Dashboard Examples app, and within there, it'll also have demos for you to run through. And one is showing the depends and rejects arguments. So it's a really great place to start using tokens and see the different use cases for them. If we go on to the next one, hidden text inputs. After you've gone and done things for a little while, then you may come across a scenario or a few scenarios where you have a big dashboard, and like on the example I had before, you've got a table. Depending on what value on the table, value on that table you select, it will do different things. And you can very, very quickly build up a lot of logic in your dashboards to go, well, if I've selected this, then do this. If I've selected this, then do this. And if I've changed something on a higher tier, then I want to reset everything. And in that case, I've got to change. You have lots of different arguments pretty much doing the same thing, because there is no way of conditionally setting tokens based on the value of a token. I'll show you exactly what I'm talking about. So I am a massive self-confessed geek. I have an absolute ton of different IT things in my house. I've got Raspberry. You might hear the fans of my Raspberry Pi cluster sat behind me, just kind of buzzing away. And I have that many different smart lights. I actually blew the limit of my my smart home hub. So I use something called Home Assistant. Complete self-promotion. Besides, I've got a big talk on smart home stuff. But onto the actual use case here, we're pulling in different pieces of smart home tech, and we've got different things that I can view. So I've got various different motion sensors, and they send their battery information, and I can see that the batteries here. If I select the room that I'm in now, the study, and the sensor, which is just out of view, and we can see the battery level. And over a 24-hour period, it's showing exactly as I would expect, and that's pretty much a level line. But the key thing to note here is it's a time chart showing a single metric, and that is level. As we go into lights, and I select the study bloom light, and we can see it's a light that's just behind me, and we can see what the level is. So the light level, whether it is really bright or whether it's not. And this time chart, we're showing state, max, min, and average. The states and it's a chart overlay, which is a legend on the right, which is based on the value, the axis on the right, and maximum and average are based on the left. If we go to motion sensors and we select the same motion sensor we check the battery out for, so the study one, here we can see we've got a time chart, and this time it's max, min, and average. If I select here again on temperature, and notice as well that the time chart vanishes each time as well, and go into the study sensor temperature. So exactly the same sensor that I used before, but it also tracks temperature in the room, which is quite handy. This is all by degrees Celsius, but we can see it's the same time chart in terms of its layout. It's max, min, and average. There's no chart overlay. There's no level field. It is purely max, min, and average. So we're reusing the same thing. If I hit edit on this particular dashboard, we can see what the depends and the rejects looks like. Well, the depends in this case, what it looks like in an edit form. So any panels that we're not displaying will have this dotted line. If I change this here to lights, then we can see that these are all searches awaiting input, but also they're dashed, which means that they're hidden. And how we're controlling all this, how we would be, if you were to do it in every single panel, go, right, okay, well, if I change a value on this drop down here, then I want to go and unset these, and I want to change the query for this as well. And you might not want to show a table, you might want to show a chart. It gets really, really complicated. So what we do is we make use of that, and I'll just select a value here, just so we can see that that's there. And it's basically done this by using a hidden text input. So we're centralizing all the logic and going, well, based on the value of this token, I want to just perform this action. So I've got it lights at the moment because I've selected lights. If I change that to temp, then you can see that actually it's all reset, just the same as if I've gone and done all there. Select any sensor, it doesn't matter, and we can see that actually now we're using this token. So if you've gone and created a dashboard and someone says, right, actually, no, I don't want you to do this anymore, I want to do this instead, then making use of hidden text inputs makes it really easy to go and change a piece of logic without going and changing it in 5 or 10 different places, which is, as you get to complicated dashboards, tends to be what happens. For this, if I show you the XML, we've got that drop down. We can see the values are quite complex because the value of this drop down is drives those time charts. But actually, we can see that on the and based whenever that value changes within inputs, we can access a change event handler the same way that you saw the search in the previous example. We had it done and it would set a token. You can also for inputs have a change event handler. And in this, we've got conditions. So if the condition is, so basically if the value is battery, so if I select that value, that value associated with the battery, then I want to go, right, I'm going to set this hidden input of hide view to battery. And basically for all of this, it's just the same. It's whichever value I've selected here, I then want to set that hide view input to its corresponding one, basically. So we go all the way down to the bottom. We've got this row depends on never show, meaning this that's just a token name. If the token of never show was to be set, then it would show the row. You're never going to show that row, so I just put something that makes it really clear we're never going to show it. In this case, never show. So this is a hidden block. It will never be visible unless you're in edit mode. And so what we've got here is we've got our first input, the hide view. And whenever you're setting a token, an input from another, well, if you're ever setting the value of an input, you need to make sure that you reference the token, but you have form dot and then the token name, like we have up here. And this goes and changes the actual value that you see on the screen, which then activates the change event handler. So in this case, what we're doing is we're unsetting four different tokens, and then we are setting the token of form.showView. If we have a look at these 4 tokens, we've got time chart range, time chart min, time chart light. These are here, they're against the time charts. So panel depends, time chart light, time chart min, and time chart range. And then the selected entity is the basically the device ID for the time charts. So we've set it all the same, which is why you saw in that demo, all the time charts that populate at the same time. But that doing this will reset the whole view. So it resets everything. What you can't do in a change event handler is have some global unsets or sets or whatever it is that you want to do, and then have some conditional stuff underneath. You have to have them as separate things. So the first input is the hide view that will unset things. It will then go and set another one, another input called show view, and it will pass it its own value, which is $value $. This will then go and activate the change event for this input, which is show view, and it will go, based on this value, this is what I want to do. So the value, if the value is battery, then I want to set that token. If the value is temperature, I want to set this token. The value is motion, set this one, and light, show this one. And this is where the demo really just kind of finishes off, where we've got the, where when you, if you remember when we selected the motion or the lights, we had exactly the same time chart being the max, min, and average, which is what these ones are. Otherwise, you've got the one specific for battery or for lights. So this is a really easy way to centralize the logic, and I am a massive fan of using this. It is a very difficult topic to really give a good demo for without having a massively complex dashboard. But it really just gives you an idea and just a flavor on how you can use conditional arguments based on the value of a token. And this is, for me, this is the way to do it. And I've seen a lot of different people as well advocate this approach when you've got a very complex dashboard. It also turns you to the dashboard hero for your organization. I've done so many more different pieces of dashboarding for different organizations because I've been able to implement this kind of logic, which is really, really useful. Are there any questions so far? I realize I've done 2 demos and I haven't asked if there's any questions, so I apologize.
That's really good, Tom.
Cool.
Yeah, I just want to, can we get the dashboard code, or if we can access the URL? So what is feasible?
I am putting an app together, but it's coinciding because I'm actually doing this presentation. I've done this presentation for B-sides, so you've got a sneaky peek of a preview of a presentation for B-sides. So once it's done on B-sides, then it'll be going out to everyone. But I'll certainly pass on the link as well when it goes out.
Okay.
Cool. So then on to CSS, and there's actually a few things with this particular demo. So I open up the dashboard this time. It looks like a standard dashboard, and then the color changes to orange in this case. So this is kind of linking in with that the light that I selected earlier. This dashboard is controlled off that light color. So there is a field. So this, I've got a query here. It's basically checking every 10 seconds or something what the color is for a particular light, and based on there, it will go and set that into a token, and then the CSS is reading that token value to change the color on this single value, and on the background as well. So if I go and change onto B size, so I turn this light on, I go and change it to pink. So it's now pink. I check behind and it is definitely pink. And go back down to here, hit refresh on this particular query, and there we go. The dashboard automatically changes to pink. Now this is probably going to hurt your eyes a little bit, so let's just change it back to, I don't know, orange, and rerun that query again. There we go. Right. So something that's really, really handy with CSS, and this is a really basic example of it, is how when you change the values of CSS, it will automatically update your dashboard, update the page. And I made a lot of use of this in the virtualracer.conf, where we had 10 different races, 10 different race sponsors, and we had the same dashboard to visualize the race results. But because each had a different sponsor, I wanted to make sure that the dashboard had a very good look and feel that represented the branding for that particular customer. And this is where, for me, CSS becomes really strong, because we had the same dashboard, but now it looked the same. Depending on if it was Dell, then it would be the brand colors for Dell. If it was Splunk, it was the brand colors for Splunk. And all of a sudden, you've got a generic Splunk dashboard now looking and feeling a lot more like what would be on par for that company's brand. And I've done this for clients as well, and it's gone and hit a home run every single time when you've gone and once you've gone and understood a company's brand, and you make the dashboard look and feel as though it's anything else that the company would produce. I'm a really big fan of changing CSS. So if I show the XML for this, because again, it sounds as though it could be quite complex, and it's actually really not. It's, again, we've got a a row that's never going to be displayed. And here we've got a panel and then an HTML block, a style block within that HTML. And here we're using the dashboard body object, which is the main dashboard. So that's the main thing that you see. And we're going, right, I'm setting the background color to the token of the token value of BG underscore color. And I'll go over that a little bit more, just again showing you how that's set. And then we've got, for this here, this single value, we've got single result. And this time we use the CSS argument of fill, or CSS property of fill, should I say. And then again, we're using the same token. And for each of these, we have to use the important argument, because otherwise that basically goes and puts it at the top of the hierarchy for whether you should be doing something or not. If it's not there, then there will be something inbuilt to Splunk that goes, actually, no, this is what it should be. So we have to use the important here. Ideally, it's best practice. If you don't have to use important, don't use it. Otherwise, it is there for these particular examples. Now you can go a lot more further into this. There are a lot more different properties that you could change. I, for instance, go and change like the width of a panel. If I've got 2 panels on a row, normally automatically that will be 50% on one, 50% on another. Well, if you've got a single value on one side and you've got a chart on the other, you don't want to give a single value the same amount of screen space that you would give a chart. So I would tend to use CSS to change that row so that panel 1 has got 25% of the screen and panel 2 has got 75% of the screen. Is a good and simple example for that. And to change individual panels, different rows, then you would just assign an ID. And we've got a search here as well with an ID, but this is for a different reason, which I'll go into in a second. But it's exactly the same. So you would go ID equals, and then the ID you want to give, could be anything, usually something meaningful, and then you reference that in CSS with a hash and then the name of your ID. So if I wanted to change a particular single result, I could do hash and then the name of the ID I've given for a single result, and space, then dot single result, and fill, and it will go and do that way. Clara Merriman does an amazing blog series called Clarification, and one blog post she did was specific around CSS. I really recommend giving that a check out. That will give you a lot more different examples for using CSS. The other thing that I wanted to touch with this particular example is base searches. I cannot advocate enough, if you do dashboarding, to make use of base searches. They are a fantastic way to minimize the impact on your environment when it comes to searches. If you can imagine you have a dashboard and it has 12 different panels. If every single panel you've gone into the UI and you've gone index equals blah blah blah, source type is this, and you've done that for every single panel, then when you open that dashboard, it's going to execute 12 searches. So that's going to be quite an intense load on your environment. If you're not an admin, if you are a user, you are going to be very quickly hitting your user quotas, and you probably will see the UI say, this is queued, this search is queued, waiting on other ones to finish, and that's because you hit your quota. However, if all your searches are basically doing the same thing, certainly if they are pulling the same events out of the indexer, then there's a good chance you can make use of base searches, which is where a search is executed once, and then you have what's called post-process searches, which basically just run off the results of that query that you had at the start. And you do that just by using ID the same way that you do for CSS. So in this case, we've got ID equals main base. We've got our main key. So index is Westy homed, and then we've got some other things, and finishing it off with a time chart, which is what's called a transforming command. We'll come back to that shortly. Then we've got this chart here, and here we are using that base. Are we using that base search? Yeah. So here on the chart, we're using the base search. So we're using the results of that main search, and we do that by going search, and then where we had ID before, we now have, sorry, I'll come back to that question in a minute, where we have base equals and then main base. So whereas before we had ID equals main base, now it's
base equals main base, and that basically goes, right, I want to read the results of that base search. And you can actually chain them up, so you can have base equals main base, and you could have ID equals secondary base, and then so you've got two different searches to branch off of. Here we're just keeping it really simple. So then we have the query. We don't need certain arguments like earliest and latest and sample ratio, refresh type. They're not going to be valid here because it's just running off the results of an earlier search. So we just have query, and here we're just going, actually we want to remove that field, and then we just want to table things out. If we go back to what we were talking about before with the 12 panel dashboard, if they're all basically doing the same thing, you can reduce the hit on your environment from 12 searches to 1 and just show different results from that one search if they're all using the same events. It may be that you would have to do a few different searches, but certainly you'll be able to minimize the impact on your environment quite a lot. There are a couple of caveats with base searches though. First one is that you need to make sure that you use a transforming command. That means it needs to be chart, stats, time chart. On the docs site, it has a complete list of all the different transforming commands, but the ones you tend to come across are chart, time chart, and stats. So that's rule number one, you need to be doing that. Or you need to make sure that that you're not going to hit an event limit, and it does change. I think at the moment it's something like 100,000 results. So if you're not using a transforming command, then you can still run your search as a base search. But if it has more than 100,000 results, then your final panel is never going to show that you've hit that event threshold. It will just show a random chart based on 100,000 results from the search that you originally ran. So that's something to bear in mind. Also, if you're not using a transforming command, you also need to use either the fields command, or the table command, just to specify the fields that you want to pass out from your base search into your post-process searches. Again, another easy trip up, and I've spent many hours trying to find out why my base searches aren't working, and it's because I'm not using a transforming search, because I know the event count is less than the threshold, and I've not used the fields or the table command, in which case it just shows 0 results. When you expand that search out and you go, well, hang on a minute, why is it showing 0 results? It will show results which look completely different, or actually shows results if you've got no results. And then you'll scratch your head forevermore, unless you go back and check your base search has got fields or table or a transforming command. The other really good thing, so the other thing to bear in mind as well with a base search, you have to edit in the UI, in the XML. So you do have to go to edit, then edit XML, and then insert that block here. But this search block is exactly the same as that search block in terms of I could just do a copy there, paste to the top, and then go ID. The other thing as well that's quite cool is that if you have a panel and actually you have that panel search is doing everything that you want, and you want to then do something afterwards, so that is basically a base search, then you can have that. You could actually insert ID and then the name of your base search right there, and that would then become a base search, even though it's a panel, an in-panel search. So it's quite cool being able to do that as well. And if you have a saved search, and that saved search is running on a schedule basis, normally in an in-panel search, you can just go and show the results of that base of that scheduled search. However, one thing that you can also do is you can, and I would tend to do this at the top, you can go and reference that saved search. And normally, if you then go and change it, it would then execute as it is. It would execute that search in full. When it's a base search, you can actually make use of post-process searches to then just run a search based on the results of that saved search, which makes your things really lightning fast if you're wanting to show a dashboard and show different metrics from that saved search by doing that. I really do recommend having a good play with it, because you can really boost your performance and learn quite a lot through playing with base searches. Also, you probably would find that how to branch different things together, you would have what would normally look like a really weird search, running a stats and then another stats and then another stats off of that to get to that single value, rather than just running a single stats. So if you're an admin, you're looking at certain people's searches and going, why is it doing it that way? You can make it look better. It could be because it's running off a base search, because a full search end-to-end will look quite different from what you would normally expect. Any questions on that so far? I realise I've just talked for quite a long time about different things. Nope. Oh, yeah, sorry, there was one in chat. Let's go and check the chat. So can we make the CSS color change in the dashboard based on result obtained at runtime? For instance, I have a dashboard which gives a count of different errors in the past 1 hour, past 24 hours, and past 7 days to give a visual comparison and determine health of the application. If the count of errors in the last 1 hour is quite high relative to the 24, some threshold value, can the dashboard change its color? Yes. So just go back to this a second. That is exactly what we're doing. So you would have to have your search and basically determine what your the resulting color you would like to be. But this is doing exactly the same. Which one is it? It's this one here. It's doing exactly the same thing. So we're showing the color. We're changing the colors based on the value of a field. So here we are running the search, and one of the fields that we're outputting is RGB color. So we're kind of manipulating the field in search here to go make it a valid CSS recognized format for an RGB color, which is why we've got the square brackets surrounding the color field, and we're doing various different things to that color field as well. Sorry, no, we're not. We're doing it there, but that's for the description. Yeah, here it is. So the RGB color field is set to RGB, open brackets, and then we are doing the MB join on that color, basically just making sure that it is valid CSS. And then on the done event handler, we've got the set token BG color, and we're doing that on the value of the results. In this case, it's so we do $result dot, and then we can use a field. This case is RGB underscore color. So we're taking the value of that field and we're assigning it that token, which is what this does here. That will then go and set the CSS, and then that's how you saw it automatically update based on the latest event doing exactly this. On to the next one. So like I mentioned earlier, the age-old, how do you make a dashboard visible to people outside of Splunk? Answer is you can't. You can use save searches and embedding. This has its own unique set of problems though. So if you have this dashboard here, it is basically running a trellis, producing a trellis, and it's for every single motion sensor in the house and when motion was detected in that particular room. So if I go for the first sensor here, I just select it, it's going to open up the save search itself. And this is embedded. So this is going to be running at midnight. It's looking over the last 24 hours and it's confirming it was generated 14 hours ago. Everything about this looks like a normal save search. However, when I go to edit, I can't edit it because it's embedded. So all you get given as an option is disable embedding to edit report. When you hit embed, when you try and embed a search, it's basically going to generate an iframe. There you go, an iframe right here. If I expand this right out so you can see what it's like. Yeah, so it's going to generate this iframe, and within here it's kind of unique for this iteration of it being generated. I think this bit right here is a it's a unique value for this time it was embedded. However, the key thing to bear in mind is just that that the embedding generates an iframe, and you cannot edit it unless you disable it. So you have to disable the embedding, then you can update your search, you can change your time parameters, whatever it is that you want to do, schedule, whether it's scheduled or not, and then you go and re-embed. As soon as you re-embed, the problem is that your iframe, the values for that is going to change. Now, one thing that you can do is you can just change this in the back end. You can go to savesearches.conf. You can update the properties of it and then restart Splunk D, or maybe a full restart of Splunk. But you can only do that for on-prem. You cannot do that for Splunk Cloud. You're kind of a bit stuck, or at least for some things you are. But for the main thing being the search, you're not. If we go back to the dashboard and we see exactly what the details for this search are. The key ones that you can update are the search and the time parameters for that search. So like I mentioned, we're looking over the last 24 hours. But actually what we can see is the actual search itself, all it is referencing a macro. So the macro, in this case, the name is motion_by_sensor. And how we reference a macro, if you've never come across it, is a backtick. Like the tokens where we've got dollars at the beginning and at the end, for referencing a macro, it's a backtick. So all the searches is referencing a macro. And a macro can be a part of a search, it can be a full search, it can be various different commands of a search, it may just be a single value. And you can pass arguments to a macro as well. But in here, all we're doing is we're just referencing the macro, and that gives us a few key bits of control. A macro does not know it's referenced by a safe search. It doesn't know whether that safe search is embedded or not. And the safe search, when it's executed, is just going to run what it's told. In this case, the macro. It's not going to cache the macro. It's not going to save it or in any way, shape, or form. So if you update the macro, then you update the search, and that search will update the next time that it's run on schedule. So it's a really kind of handy way to get around the fact you can't update a search. You can if you do the if you execute that macro. In this case, the macro, its actual search itself is index Westy home. It's referencing a device class, in this case motion, and then we're doing an eval and a time chart. The other thing as well that you can do, because you've got the ability to edit the search, is that you can override the time parameters, basically rendering these two. This is a REST search, rendering these two values useless by using the earliest argument and the latest argument in a search. So if you have earliest equals and then I don't know, minus 24 h at h, then it's going to go and take that as a higher priority versus whatever's in the time picker. So you can use earliest equals and latest equals, and it will use those rather than what was in the time picker when you originally saved the search. So you can still control the time period, the time span as well. So really, really cool and handy way of being able to get around the fact that you can't do anything with embedding. You kind of can by the use of macros. Again, really do recommend checking out macros for centralizing parts of your searches. I'm a bit guilty of overusing them, but you can certainly make a lot of use for them. Any questions with that? Nope. So we go into the last part, which is version control. The problem with embedding, the problem with doing this, and other things as well, if you've got a very high profile dashboard, and last year Roy produced some dashboards for some really high ranked officials for some place that I was working, is that you want to be able to control who updates it. You want to know when it's been updated, and you want to make sure that if something's been updated and it's not worked, that you want to roll back. So we can basically have a dashboard, or we can have some safe searches that do some version controls. So to do that, there is a REST endpoint. So for dashboards, there's a REST endpoint of UI views, and this is going to pull out all the properties of your dashboards. So dashboard in Splunk is called a view, and you can actually access them by going to settings and then it's user interface or UI. And then in here, there is when this loads up, the views. Basically exactly the same. You can see data UI views. So data UI views. This is going to pull up all the attributes for your dashboards. In this case, one of the field that we're really wanting to, well, the one that we want to filter on first is, because we're just controlling it to a specific app, is we're filtering to an app that I've got called Westy's World. And then the main field that we want to capture is this EAI:data. So the updated field is going to be the time that it was last updated. The title is going to be, in this case, if I was to take this dashboard, for instance, it would be dashboard underscore version underscore control. That would be the title field. The EAI data field, though, is going to be the actual XML itself. So we pull those through. We just confirm that we check what now is. We pull up a lookup called my version control. We output a few fields, and then we get, but the key thing is that we go, where the XML that I just pulled from that REST command is not the same as the XML I have in that lookup, then I want to go and update that. I just want to go and add that version, that update of the XML to that lookup, so I can see in a specific in a specific dashboard when that XML has been changed and what it's been changed from and to, and if something's gone wrong, you can easily roll back because you can just reference that lookup. So we can see here, this is the lookup itself. So we can see back dashboard in Wowzah has been updated twice, embedded report has been updated 3 times. So we can see when something was updated. If I select dashboard in Wowzers, it's then going to show those two versions of the XML. So number 1 and then number 2. So nothing much has really changed in there. If I go for background_test, then we can see the different versions. And this is a really simple search. So really, I'd want to show things like version, doing a stream stats and count, for instance. Excuse me. May want to show when it was updated. Because we're storing the date in the lookup, we can certainly view the date and the XML. So when that XML was updated, which is really, really handy and something that I really enjoy doing. You're not just limited to the views though. There's actually a REST endpoint to get the details of your conf files. So you can actually go and get the values of your props.conf, your transforms.conf, and this is really handy if you're using cloud as well, where you don't have access to the back end and go, right, okay, now I want to get all the values of my props.conf and output them to a lookup whenever anything has changed. So so you've got full control of it, as well as your own version control piece of software, whether that's GitHub or GitLab or whatever it is that you may use. And that is pretty much that. I really do appreciate you tuning in. I know that it's quite late where you are. So yeah, thank you very much. If there is any questions, then feel free to ask away.
Tom, this is Abhishek, and my specific question is related to the dashboard version control. So there had been many different applications in Splunk base for version control, but what would you recommend as a standard practice? Because many users can work on a dashboard in the development team and they can make random changes. So what, according to you, would be a standard or a best practice for dashboard version control?
So I haven't played with the different ones in Splunk base enough to say this one's better than this one, or I'd recommend this one. What I would say, if you're just going to do something as simple, if you're just, for instance, version controlling your dashboards, you could take a screenshot of this right now, take this search and have it on a schedule basis where it runs every, I don't know, 5 minutes, for instance. And then anytime anyone makes a change, then you've automatically got a backup. So if you're looking for something that you could do right now, taking that search, putting that into your own environment, make sure that you've got the permissions to hit that REST endpoint as well. Obviously update that part, but you could basically just run that every 5 minutes, and then you would be able to take a snapshot every 5 minutes. If two people have changed it within 5 minutes, then that's likely to be a thing. Then probably make your search criteria a little bit smaller. But yeah, that's certainly something that you could do.
Thanks, Tom.
You're welcome. Any other questions? Nope. Well, I really, really do appreciate you tuning in, and I hope that you found it useful. I hope that there's something there that you've gone and learned. If there is, then it'd be really great if I could hear back and you know, if you've gone and played with any of these things, and let me know whether you found it useful. Or if you found that as though you wanted to learn something else, please let me know. I am updating this all the time, and I will add that in and send you details of it as well. Thank you very much.
Yep, thanks.
Thanks, Tom.
You're welcome.
All right, take care.
Thank you, Tom, for the new Wowzah dashboard, and definitely we will use them. So actually, I'm having one question. I forgot. Yeah. So with the post-process search, I guess the export was disabled, right? So for that, we have to write the custom script, right?
Sorry. For the post-process search, you're looking for what? Sorry.
Export functionality is disabled with the post.
Correct. Yes, it is. There's a few different pieces of functionality that are actually disabled from that. So what you would have to do is you would have to select the magnifying glass to open up that search in the search screen itself, and then you'd have access to export from there. But yeah, that is unfortunately a constraint of a base search, that things such as export aren't available. But that's the way that you would get around it.
Thank you. Anyone is having any question?
Okay. Okay. It looks everyone is okay. So thank you all for joining. So thank you, Tom, for Ursi for doing this great sessions. So we have recorded this session as well. So we will provide a copy to you, and we will wait for the Splunk besides for the presentation, all these things. And it's nice to host you in our sessions. Apart from this, we have announcement like we have a cloud session upcoming, Splunk Cloud Basics. So you can join us in the 27th of May, 6 p.m. IST. So Russell is from Splunk. He's going to talk about Splunk Cloud Basics, what's new and different compared to our current Splunk on-premises solutions. So we are going to publish the events now shortly, day or two, and after that you can do the RSVP for that particular event. So I have posted the user group URL here, so you can join our user group and you can get notifications once any new event is published or we do any wrap up. So you can take the videos and everything from the this user group like we have 6 sessions, so we have all the recordings available. So thank you very much. Stay safe, stay happy. Bye bye.
Thanks very much. Cheers.
Thanks all.